Well, it's Friday. Hope everyone's doing well. Good to see you. I don't ordinarily stream on a Friday night, but it's been an unusual week, so I thought I would do that. And it helped me kind of get my thoughts together on what's going on with 5 days to go before my next attempt at the CCIE routing and switching written exam. So I'm just going to tell you where I'm at and also review some of my thoughts on a couple things I encountered. Hope you're having a good Friday night. And whether you're relaxing or studying or whatever you're doing, working, hopefully not. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about this topic. And it's interesting. I spent some time last night going over flashcards. I've been talking a lot about flashcards as part of my strategy for preparing for the written exam this time. I have a lot of my own that I have been building, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one tool I have been using is this card set that was so graciously provided by Jed Casey, who also lives near this area, by the way, Central Floridian. It's a wonderful, wonderful, set of tools to kind of test your knowledge. And I would gander to say that if you were to memorize everything that is in these almost 3,500 cards, all the notes that are in here, then you would be in very good shape for the CCIE written exam. I would gander to say that. I've not passed yet. Hopefully I will this next time. But I have gone through these quite a bit in the last week or so. And one thing I've found is in terms of just, from time to time, this happens to me where I'll get to feeling a little overwhelmed, like I've put a lot of time into studying and preparing for the exam. But then I'll launch a tool like this, and I'll go through some cards and just realize, wow, there's still so much that I don't have committed to memory or that I'm not, fully understanding. But what I found myself, I found that I need to keep myself in check in that regards, not to get discouraged, because what you realize is that these are kind of like notes. So, and I've found this when I am going through creating my own cards, is that in a way this is a sort of note-taking exercise. So, yes, there is a lot of content here in the written blueprint. There's so much material covered, and part of not getting overwhelmed is just thinking, okay, granted, I may go through 100 cards of someone else's material that they have generated, their notes, and I might get a lot of them wrong. But does that mean that I'm far off the blueprint in terms of my preparedness? Not necessarily. And so you have to be careful when looking at other studies material. Even mine, I've put out a lot of material that I've used, some of my notes. My drill sheet it's pretty big and can be intimidating trying to go through here and fill out all this. Now, granted, there's a lot here that I'm pretty sure may never make its way to an exam. A lot of these are notes, sort of related to notes. Like the block end here. I mean, I'm just picking an example, right? So let's say you were to go to my GitHub site and pull down this drill sheet and go through the drill yourself and think, well, FDFF:/7. I didn't realize that was the block end of the unique local unicast local, unique local scope IPv6 block. Does that mean that, you're guaranteed to get that question on the exam and you don't know that answer, so there's probably a lot of other answers that you don't know, so you might not pass? That's not the way to look at it, folks, and that is definitely a negative energy, and I've caught myself doing that. In fact, I noticed that the last few times I've gone through these flashcards, and I've spent like a few hours going through them, that I would come away feeling like really discouraged. That happened to me also when I took the boson exam, which again, the boson material, the CCIE written boson exam test questions, those are from someone's perspective who took a lot of notes and, was trying to cover material that falls under the auspices of the written blueprint. But yet again, does that mean that because you did not know particular details, that means you're going to fail? Not necessarily. So it's important. Yes, the intent is to filter out candidates for the CCIE lab, and the intent is to, present a very, very challenging exam, and that is true. But at the same time, feelings of being overwhelmed or being discouraged are not positive in any way. They're not going to help. So the thing is to take it all with a grain of salt, realize that, there's probably many others have told me there's a lot of luck involved. And you just learn at the best pace that you can and use these tools to help identify gaps. Again, I always go back to the blueprint. An important aspect, or something that was mentioned to me too, is the verbiage used here in the blueprint. So for example, sometimes it will say evaluate, propose changes to it. You really have to watch these verbs. And this is something that a mentor mentioned to me. Be sure that you understand what these verbs mean. There are like educational principles, standards tied behind which verbs are used here. Explain MLD. So I may come across cards here saying, or someone else's study material or a vendor's study material saying, MLD is this, you need to know this about MLD. Well, if you can explain it, that is really what the blueprint is asking us to do here. Versus IGMP, they're asking to implement and troubleshoot. Completely different verbs. I forget what these are called. There's actually a scholarly name for these terms. And, oh shoot, I cannot think of them right offhand. I have some notes about them, though. It might even be in my GitHub. Or on the old Google Drive. Let me check that real quick, folks. Maybe I can pull up like what these... This is really trimmed down, and there's some more trimming down I need to do, because most of this I've put on GitHub now. But there is a reference... There's a reference here. Yeah, I cannot actually put my hands on it now, but yeah, I'll find it in my notes. But basically, yeah, so again, try not to be overwhelmed. It's easy for us as engineers also with the mindset to get overwhelmed, but don't let that happen to you. Just keep going at your own pace and learn what you can and, do your best. That's all you can do. But I'm feeling pretty good. Hey, mentors, my boy Land grinding hard, motivating me, man, and others. 2019 is our year. Yes, sir. And here's some coffee to you, my friend, mentors. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Hope all is well. Man, my AC kicked on last night. We went from cold here in Central Florida to it warmed up again. I'm not complaining. I'm glad because I just came from Atlanta area, Georgia, where it was chilly, like down in the 30s. So I'm so glad to be back in Florida weather. But yeah, that's just the thing I want to bring up. Take care using other study materials. It's easy as humans. Our tendency is sometimes fight or flight, right? It's panic. Don't panic because you go through 3,500 flashcards and you don't get all the answers that you think you would like correctly, right? Mentors, yes, very warm 80s. Why I'm happy to live in old sunny Florida. Me too, man. I appreciate it more and more, especially when I travel. But here's what's been going on with me today. I had a good review day. This was day 7 of the full days of review. And I realized something today that I haven't really explained what I meant by review. I actually have a process. So my process is to go through the blueprint section. So today I was finishing up 6. I got a little behind. Like I said, I spent a lot of time. There's a lot to cover in infrastructure services. These sections are not evenly split in terms of like material, but I got as far as I could, and then today I covered SLA, NetFlow, EEM, and then just recently in late afternoon I finally got to Evolving Technologies, which was my schedule. I'm scheduled to finish this today. I may not get all the way through it, but I might. I've got through cloud, and I'm on SDN right now, and I moved pretty far through SDN, so we might finish Evolving Technologies. But my process was to mark all these sections to review. So when I hit a section that is for review, that should have been, this needs to go here. So when I hit a section that says review, like I have one left here, configuration management tools. What I'll do is, once I identify that section, I say, okay, I need to review material over that section. That is a weak area for me. So I pick one of various sources, and today it depends on the topic. So these are the sources that I have been leveraging, and I will just basically scan through them and say which one is the best that covers this area of the blueprint, this topic. Mentors, can I share the 35C3 conf link with your views? Definitely good and talk over that. Absolutely, mentors. Go for it, man. You are a mod. Share away, buddy. Appreciate it. So I've been rotating amongst these three resources. CCIE in 8 weeks. The official certification guides on Safari Books Online. And the other resource has been, what is the other resource? Well, some of my own notes, and also been going through Cisco documentation. Basically the way you would when you're first learning a topic. But in this case, I'm quickly moving through. I'm not doing a deep dive. I'm basically going through, okay, in this section, configuration management tools, what is it that I don't know yet? Like, what do I still not know? And cover that. And then what do I need to memorize? Mentors, use any of Narvik materials. I have not purchased any of his materials, although the official certification guide is co-authored by him. So I am using the official cert guide, which I think he did volume 2. So yeah, and so I'm just cycling through these in a quick fashion. And what I'm doing is, if I don't know something, I try to comprehend it. I do additional research. Most of these areas I've already covered. That's the idea, right? Oh, the other one is networklessons.com. So what I typically do is, I've got 3 screens connected to this iMac, and I'll put up each one on its own screen. Like maybe this monitor will have full screen, maximize full screen. I'll have network lessons, CCIE in 8 weeks, OCG. And then what I'll do is I'll rapidly, like when I hit a new area of the blueprint, I'll rapidly review each one and just say, okay, this is the one that I need to go into some depth. I'll cover the area and make sure that I'm comprehending that topic, or that I'm going back through and refreshing my memory on that topic enough to where I feel comfortable with it. Hey, Casadix, hey man, did you plan to create a training after your journey? Who knows? I'm not sure. I know a lot of people do that. I will definitely create some videos for sure. Like I'll plan after I pass the written, I plan to publish a video on if you want to pass the written, here's the strategy I used. Also for the lab exam, like, I know I cover things every day in the vlog, but I'm going to do specifically, it won't be a stream. It'll be an actual YouTube video, just a summarized, quick discussion of all the points. I'm also going to do one on cost. like what my, journey cost me. And then where it's going to go from here, I'm not sure. One reason I'm doing all this, learning streaming, setting up, buying the equipment, learning Twitch and YouTube and creating an Instagram account, Twitter account for all this, is that I feel like I may use it one day for something. Mentors, we can collab, land, and invite some of our Discord crew to join us. Absolutely. Yeah, I want to do one of those too, like a meetup. I know we haven't done one in months, but, just been so nose deep into this stuff. But yeah, so I'll go through a quick review and make sure I feel comfortable then with that topic. And then what I do is I figure out, okay, what do I need to memorize potentially for the exam? And I make a flashcard. Thanks. Thank you, Casadix. I appreciate it, man. So that's what I've been doing. And right now I'm up to 788 flashcards. These are notes that I took that I said, okay, I've either seen this already on the exam, or I have a feeling that this could be covered on the exam, or I just need to memorize this for my own learning to understand it better. And so far, like I said, I have 788. Who knows where I'll be when I'm done? Probably close to 1,000. But that's what I'm doing. So that is my process, folks. That is my review process that has gone over the course of these last 7 days. Not linearly, but, one day for each major section of the blueprint. And it's been great. It's been awesome. So here's our map, Blueprint 6.0 Infrastructure Services. Like I said, I had not finished that. So I went through DHCP, NTP, IPSLA today, EEM. By the way, folks, this kept getting me, and I would memorize it, and then I would forget it, and I would memorize it and forget it. So what I did is, this is the EEM, the set function of EEM. You have different components of EEM, right? You have actions that you can take. You have events. You have actions to take when those events occur. And then you have sets where you can set certain variables. And right now, set is limited to pretty much exit status. There's not a lot else that you can set there. But what would give me a lot is exit status. So I created a flow chart, a process diagram, I should say. And it's out there on GitHub. I've already posted out there. I did it in draw.io. And EEM, I have a folder out there, and this is the diagram. You will feel more relaxed after written land. Labbing feels more at home and can get frustrating, get more practical app and no memorization. You either know it or you don't. Law. Yeah, I go along with what you're saying there, mentors, and it's interesting. Some of the bloggers who talked about their experience have talked about the ramped up sort of difficulty of the written and how it's such a different exam than the lab. And even Tim McConaughey commented that he thought the written exam was just as difficult or even more difficult than the lab, just because of the nature of it. I think I'll feel a lot more comfortable with the lab than how I've done with the written. So that's encouraging. I hope so. This is the diagram I came up with. So yeah, mentors said the written was difficult for you as well. I've heard that a lot of people say that. So at first, when you look at these sets, you think, okay, this actually looks, this looks pretty simple. But there is some, not so basic logic going on here. And what we're talking about is the sync variable. So let's say you have EEM and you create an applet that says when someone types the event that we want to register is when someone types show run at the CLI. That's as a CLI event. And then your action is going to be, maybe action CLI is going to be, or your action will be to display a message. Well, that is a trigger, right? The EEMs run off of these triggers or a schedule. And the EEMs generally they can be set to respond to things that happen on the CLI. So this is basically something that is there in the background that says when you type this in the CLI, it triggers this script to run, this applet. Well, there's a few different ways this applet can run in conjunction with your CLI. Let's say you do a show tech support, right? When you do show tech support on a Cisco router, that let's say it's a 4500 or 4400 series iOS XE router, you're going to generate, I mean, that's going to take a little while to run, right? So, you know, that's going to take a lot of processor cycles. That can take some time. You really want a way to define, you know, how the applet and the CLI command that you type and the applet that that command triggers, how are they going to work together? So the Cisco iOS has an option called sync. And you put it right in your applet. You say, okay, this CLI command is going to trigger this applet, and this applet, when it runs, I want either sync to be yes or no. Could you use regex to trigger some action? I believe you can, yes. It's a very robust. Yeah, you can use regex in applets, sure enough. And it's a very robust system, right? You have two ways essentially to script on iOS and it is iOS router, and two principal ways that are built in to the code. And one is an applet, EEM applet, and the other is a TCL script, right? And TCL is very varied as well. It's, you know, has a lot of capability. But when you launch EEM, we're going to say, okay, let's say we do a show tech support, which may take a lot of processor cycles, and it may take, you know, 30 seconds to run. The sync says, okay, should these run synchronously or asynchronously? And what that means is so if you say sync yes, and we're going to use synchronous processing, that means that the EEM applet and CLI command sort of merge. These are my words. They merge into sort of a single linear process. So we're not going to multi-thread, but we'll say, okay, this triggers this. When it does, what we're going to do is we're going to run the EEM applet first, and we're going to pause this CLI command. We're not going to run show tech support yet. We're going to go ahead and process. We're going to let the EEM applet do what it wants to do first. That's synchronous, okay? Asynchronous means they're basically parallel processing. So the EEM applet is going to run and the CLI command is going to run separately. We're not going to pause the CLI command in any way. We're going to run show tech support, and then we're going to run our EEM applet, you know, actions. That's what sync and no sync means. Now, there's still other conditions here. So let's say we run synchronous, say sync yes. Then there's another variable that can be set to determine, well, you know what? After the applet runs, then it's the CLI command's turn. Do we even want it to run at all? And that is so let's say the EEM applet executes, and that's all these are lined up here, right? The applet completes or exits. We have this variable called _exit _ status. And when it can be set to a 0 or it can be set to a 1. If we set that to a 0, you know what? The CLI command is basically going to be skipped. We're not going to run it at all. We're just going to, you know, it's going to go nowhere. And we're going to basically return control of the CLI back to the operator. And that is the default action, by the way. So if you just say action CLI, you know, or if you have a set command, it says exit status, or no, if you have the action, it says CLI sync yes, and exit status is not defined in the applet, it defaults to 0, and that CLI command will not run. You can set it to 1 manually in the applet, and when you do that, that means when synchronization is enabled, that once the EM applet completes, then the CLI command will be executed that the operator originally typed at the console, the terminal, whatever the case may be, right? Now, let's say sync is set to no. Then we basically have the same thing going on here, but the difference, as I mentioned before, is that the EM applet is going to run and it doesn't have any dependency, or we don't care. The CLI command can go on and be processed at the same time. So the parser can go ahead and evaluate that command. The CLI is not necessarily paused. However, so in that case, the EM applet executes and the applet completes or exits, right? It goes off into the world and does what it is meant to do. Then the CLI command is processed, but there's still an option to skip or not. And this is actually called skip. It's not a variable, exit underscore status. It's the keyword skip. So you would say sync no, skip yes or no. And this is required. If you type sync no, you have to specify, hey, are we going to skip or not? And in this case, we're going to say either yes or no. When we say no, the CLI command is executed. Yes, it is not. So it looks pretty simple, but when you see it on the screen, it's like plus the naming and the operation of things. You know what I should add to this is the actual CLI an example. I'll do that. I'll do that, yeah, after the stream. We'll take care of that. So anyway, that's out there when you're studying that. That should help you. But that's the kind of things I was doing during the review, making sure I understood those. I also created like 6 flashcards about this. Because, I mean, it was in the boson a lot, and it's part of the blueprint. Then I moved on to Blueprint 7.0, Evolving Technologies. I got through cloud computing, got way through SD and network programmability, still working on that. So where do I go from here? I've got, technically I have 5 days, but in reality, today's almost over. So I've really got 4 days. And when you think about it, I have to work part of this day, the first. And I'm including as a day the second, which is the actual exam day. So in reality, I have 3 full good study days left. What I plan to do with those, this has evolved over time, right? But I think what I've determined I need to do is go through the flashcards. It's going to be all now about, I'm not really going to be learning anything new here in the next 3 days. Or I probably will, but I'm not, that's not the intent. But I just need to, in those weak areas, review, and memorize. Like there's topics I know, but I don't necessarily have memorized what the command is, or I don't have necessarily memorized, what this bit or that bit is and what it does, or what this acronym stands for. I came across some new acronyms today that I was like, okay, let me switch decks. And let's see if I can go to the end here. Well, we'll go evolving. Whew, that's a lot of cards, folks. Oh, it's showing. Decks. I guess I need to change it here. Yeah, evolving. Well, I was pretty sure I tagged that stuff with evolving. Yeah, Cisco XNC. I was like, okay, what is that? This was not mentioned, and this could be older material that I was looking at, and maybe that's why, but just in case, I've made some Cisco, some flashcards of it. Core features of Cisco. That's extensible network controller, part of Cisco 1PK and all that stuff. Anyway, so that's what I plan to do. I also want to go through the OCG questions. I want to go through some of the questions that have stumped me with reviewing with Dude for Him. I'm going to go back through all my tweets. We tend to correspond on Twitter, DMs. And I'm just going to go through what are all these memorization areas that I need to make sure I have. Also, there's questions in the OCGs and in CCIE in 8 weeks, like at the beginning and the end of chapters. I'm going to go through those and just essentially I'm going to, I'm thinking of doing a timing thing. Like I may do half an hour of just flashcard review, and then I'll have a Pomodoro clock, and then the other half hour I'm going to go through and look at these other sources of review material, memorization material. OCG has some good practice. Like it has memory drills and practice drills on like subnetting and hex and things like that. So there's some tools there that it has to kind of help you prepare as well for the exam. So that's my strategy going forward, folks. Thanks for sharing the time with me. I do have one trivia question here. And feel free to chime in if you think you know the answer. We went over this today, Dude for Him and I, and he got it right. He did good. So what is the DIS election criteria? So let's back up a little bit. Casadix, hey, take a deep breath and keep going. We're sending good vibes to you, man. Thank you, Casadix. I appreciate it, man. I feel it. The communities have been very supportive, man. So yeah, DIS, what is it? Designated Intermediate System. And this is part of which protocol? ISIS, right? So like OSPF, and as a link state routing protocol, ISIS on a shared segment or shared link, like OSPF, it wants to designate a system or a router to sort of, it's an efficiency mechanism, right? Let's say you have an Ethernet link, a broadcast network link, and you've got 8 routers sharing that link. Well, every router has to have, get updates to its database, its local link state database. Just as in OSPF, you have to have it in ISIS, right? So why not have one device sort of designated? Not everybody has to send full mesh, all updates to every other router and get acknowledgments back, right? That could generate a lot of traffic, especially during a convergence event, right? So the idea is have a designated system on the network. In OSPF, it's called there's actually 2 for each segment. There's a DR in most, for broadcast segments, you have a DR and a BDR, right? Backup designated router and a designated router. On ISIS, you have a single router that is elected, and it is called a designated intermediate system. It's also called a pseudonode. It has significance to the adjacencies that are formed. And it's kind of similar to the way OSPF does, where you have one type of adjacency that you maintain with the DR and the BDR in a shared segment for the DR others. With ISIS, you have a pseudonode, and essentially your nodes on that link will establish an adjacency with the pseudonode, including the node itself that is acting as the pseudonode. And that is usually done by the DIS, Designated Intermediate System. So there's an election process, right? It has to be automated somehow. Not require operator intervention each time. So just like in OSPF, there's a certain criteria that is used to elect the BDR and DR, and in ISIS it is done via, there are two criteria that are used. So the first one is the interface priority, and that is the highest. And then you have Mac, excuse me. In ISIS terms, it is called the SP, what is the, now I'm going to have to look it up. Network is the SAP, Network Service Access Point. No, thank you, Casadix. Subnetwork, the INSPA, right? Network, subnetwork point of attachment. And because we can have different types of networks, on an Ethernet network, we might think of this as a MAC address. And on Ethernet networks, this is what this ends up being, right? It is a MAC address, but you could have frame relay, right? Interface. That is a point-to-multi-point, right? NBMA type, like we have in OSPF. That's a specific type in OSPF. In ISIS, this would be a DHCP address, right? Subnet, I can't spell. So generally, it's by the interface priority, and I think 63 is a default. Let me double check that though. And again, I'm going by memory. I didn't actually look up the answer. I could go to Twitter because just to make sure here, folks, I do, don't always claim to have authoritative information, but I try to be right. See, I'm glad I checked. The default is actually 64. Yeah, and of course this is configurable. Yeah, and as he mentioned, if DHCP is the same number, I said address here, it is really a number. Tiebreaker is system ID. So that is your DI selection criteria. I just Googled myself. Guess I did not retain this info. I should have. Lol. Well, hey, man. I hope this doesn't happen. I put a lot of effort into learning a lot of this material for the written. And I just know how I am. Once I get focused on the lab, I'll try to make room for informational lab. I hope I don't forget a lot of this stuff. And I'm sure I will. I'll have to refresh. But it's just so much, so much. But it's there to draw on somewhere in our recesses, hopefully. This is a link that I saw. I was also like doing some chores this morning. I'm trying to take advantage of every minute. I was doing some chores and I was listening to another I&E written series video. And I'd forgotten about this. Brian McGann had mentioned BGP wedgies. And this came up with a discussion about BGP community attributes with ISPs, and talked about these different scenarios where you could get a BGP wedgie. And he was on the video, he was like, I know this sounds like a joke, but I'm not kidding here. It's called a BGP wedgie. So anyway, check it out. BGP can be so complex sometimes, as we all know. And there's some really good examples of it here. So if you want to mix, jumble your brain up a little bit, definitely check those out. But it does help kind of explain why we have some of these more advanced features in BGP to take care of some of these unexpected path vector protocol behaviors. Well, thanks so much for tuning in, folks. I really appreciate it. Oh, here's the link. Appreciate y'all hanging out. Good wishes. I'll be streaming tomorrow as well, depending on how far I get. It will determine when. But I hope you'll have a great weekend and send in good bits to the universe. And wherever you are, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate the support. And we shall see you all here tomorrow in the Land Tamer stream. Have a great night.